All right, guys, normally Montreal's Elite Unleashed's brand is red and white, but today we are going burgundy with Toby Lyle, the owner of many restaurants here in Montreal, including one of your probably favorites, the Burgundy Lion. We're really excited to speak with him. All right, welcome back to Montreal's Elite Unleashed, the podcast for hustlers looking to level up their lives. I'm your host, Logan Boyce. With me, as always, and back in business is John Ehrlich. What's up, John? Toby, thank you so much for coming and agreeing to do this for us. I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit better and talk about whiskey and restaurants and everything under the sun. So thanks so much for being here.
I'm excited too, guys. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. So why don't we start with the restaurants that you actually own and manage right now?
Yeah, so the Burgundy Lion is the mothership. It was 2008 we opened that, and now we have the Bishop and Bag, which is our gin pub up in Mile End on St. Peter. The Brit and Chips actually opened before Bishop and Bag, which
Classic.
is our fish and chip shop.
Nice.
And we have the Wolf and Workman pub, which is in Old Montreal.
It's one of my faves. Yeah, I love that place. I took my mom there a couple times when we had to go sign at notaries downtown. I love that place. The garden in the back is just such a... All the waiters and waitresses. I think that's a good kind of segue is how do you find the people that work at these places? Did you just find the right person to find those people?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'll be involved in hiring managers, but then I won't be involved in hiring everyone else. There's a huge advantage of being 16 years old, where as we've grown from restaurant to restaurant, when we open a new one.
I thought you were saying there was an advantage of being 16 years old, like you hire 16-year-olds. I'm like, friend, I don't know if that's allowed.
It's allowed. It is allowed in the back house. But anyway, So we, once you get that first initial staff, as you grow, you're going to move some people over to the new restaurants, the right people.
Right.
As we've grown, the biggest thing we've done is that ownership of the new restaurants is we always bring one or two people on from who are managers or chefs or whatever who worked with us in the past. So as we expand, we're going to give somebody sweat equity or equity in the business so that we always have ownership eyes on site at every restaurant. So we've grown. We are 10 owners total. I mean, there's only a couple of us who are owners of all of them, but there's 10 total owners of the group, and it's super, super important. It's the one thing that's, I think, one of the reasons we've been successful is there's always an owner on site.
Wow. Well, yeah. Why did you choose to go that route? A lot of people would look at that and be like, that doesn't make sense. If you could do it yourself, why not do it yourself?
There's something, like I was saying, owner's eyes. There's something to be said for it. You can have the best manager in the world. There's some things they'll never see. When it's their money involved, whether it's ordering that cheaper napkin or finding better soap or whatever it is, having an owner on site is always going to make the business run better.
That's so awesome. And you're empowering these people that have worked their ass off for X amount of time, and you're putting them into positions to be owners of the next place. That's so cool.
I mean, I won't lie. It's also, it's good for employee loyalty.
Retention, for
as
sure.
well, because, they see that, hey, this guy started, I have guys who started as busboys who are now owners.
That's so friggin' cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
How did you come up with all these concepts? So you got the gin shop, you got the fish and chips place, and you got the Wolf and Workman. Or where were the concepts of these come from?
I mean, the common theme there is British, obviously. I'm the first of my generation to be born here. My parents came over right before I was born.
Yep.
And I spent my summers in the UK until I was about 18. And my grandfather actually was a pub landlord in a small town called Abingdon. I always wanted to do something in the pub realm, and there was a lot of Irish pubs in Montreal, and we sort of wanted to do something a little bit more modern British pub as opposed to an Irish pub.
And have you encountered any kind of pushback from, obviously, Montreal, Quebec, extremely French. Do you have any kind of pushback with regards to how British because you're unabashedly British with your marketing and all of that kind of stuff. Tell me a couple stories about that.
It's the opposite.
Really?
It was shocking. When I first opened, I was expecting my client base to be Anglophone, Anglophiles, expats, that sort of vibe. But it is shockingly amount of French Canadians, of Quebecers, who are Anglophiles, who are like enthralled by this concept of this magical land where they still have kings and queens and stuff like that. And there's a huge portion of my client base that are just excited and they love it. It's funny. You almost get away with more of the English stuff by not by being British English as opposed to Canadian English, right? And it's like, it's a cultural thing. It's
like that niche.
That's
because
cool.
it's a niche, they're cool with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So we, it's I haven't. I mean, I've had a few run-ins with the OQLF, as everyone has.
Of course.
That's par for the course. They tried to tell me I couldn't use the word fish and chips anymore. That was a fun one.
They wanted
Poisson frit et frites was what they said.
Oh, that just doesn't have the same ring, though.
No.
Yeah, I'm not ordering the poisson frit et frites.
No, but they actually relented. They backed down on it, and they accepted it and put it into the French-Canadian vernacular that you can say fish and chips.
Yeah, because they wouldn't have only come after you guys for that.
Do you remember the Pastagate thing?
Yes.
Yeah, it was at the same time when they went after Buonanotte because they had pasta on the menu.
Really?
Yeah, it was the same time as that. They came after us and did the same thing.
I think that's great because I always dreamed of growing up when I started, getting a real job and paying taxes. That's what, those
The
taxes
tax
are going
money
to pay
would go,
for.
yeah.
That's always been my dream.
Yeah. I had a TripAdvisor sign that I won like a #1 ranked TripAdvisor
Heck
thing.
yeah.
And it was in English only.
Oh my God.
And they made me take it down.
No.
Oh God, that's funny,
A
dude.
little sticker in the corner of the window. Anyway.
Oh God.
You had a Yelp sign. Yelp wasn't Yelp with the accent.
yeah. That's funny, man.
That's crazy.
So, obviously, we're talking about all the different restaurants that you have. Do you have a favorite?
I love all my children.
I was gonna say.
You have to say that.
When I was growing up, my mom used to always tell each of our, because I got 2 older sisters, and she would tell us, you're my favorite child today.
Yeah, it's whichever one I'm at right then, that's my favorite.
Yeah,
right?
fair enough. So obviously we met you about a year ago. We did a whiskey tasting down at the Burgundy Lion. How did that start up? How did that become something you became passionate about?
Listen, I was always into whiskey. I'd been working in the industry before. I was working in other pubs. I was always curious about whiskey. And I had my origin story on whiskey was like a silly 19-year-old road trip down with a couple guys in like a 1986 Crown Victoria or something, down to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. And we stopped at Jack Daniels, and I walked in and I was like, okay, so where's the real factory? Because this is just like this old wood place with wooden materials, and there's no, it's not a factory. There's no machines here. And that was when I was like, whoa, this is where it's all made. This is amazing, right? And then I started to really, really get more into it. Obviously, I'd spent some time in Scotland as a kid.
I was going to ask, because obviously that's going from Kentucky bourbon over to...
Yeah, I mean, it's whiskey's whiskey, though. It's the same style, like the same process to make it. So anyway, I got more and more into it. I've been very fortunate. I always wanted to open a whiskey bar, sort of learning more and more about it, but I've been fortunate since we opened to have been invited quite a few times over to Scotland to hang out and down to Kentucky to watch the guys do what they do, watch the master blenders make whiskey.
And you're known for having one of the largest whiskey collections. Is that what it is?
Yeah, we actually have the largest by far, I think now, whiskey collection in Quebec, and apparently we sell more single malt whiskey than anyone in the country.
Is that just Burgundy Lion does?
Yeah, just Burgundy Lion.
Wow.
Yeah, the other places we have decent whiskey collections, but it's not. It's Burgundy Line's 750 different expressions of whiskey. Yeah.
Holy cow.
I have a separate insurance policy just for my whiskey.
I was going to say, yeah.
And do you have a favorite of the whiskeys that you carry?
It's almost like the pub. No, it is.
They're
like,
all my children.
Yeah, they are. But like every 2 weeks, I discover a new whiskey. I'm like, wow, this is the best. I love it. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, this is the best. I love it. And
Which one is current?
What am I on right now? I'm really into the Nika coffee malt.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, really interesting whiskey and the way it's made and everything. I did a tasting with the master blender via Zoom, 7 p.m.
Not the master blender, but Nika was here a few months ago as well.
Yeah, one of the reps. Yeah, but it wasn't the guys from Japan.
No.
I don't think.
I don't know.
No, but we did a tasting with the master blender. It was 7 p.m. here, 7 a.m. there. He was drinking with us. I was like,
what?
What a beast!
Thursday morning.
What a beast!
Enjoy your day. No, but it's just different. It's a little bit more original. It's not every whiskey is different, but when you have like a new flavor that you've never really experienced, that's my.
So
favorite
were
one.
you just trying the ones that you can get the SAQ, the coffee grain Nikas?
There's the coffee grain, the coffee malt. Yeah, that's the ones. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
it's great.
very
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, no, sorry. That tasting we had some.
That's what I was going to ask.
Some smuggled in stuff, but yeah, there was. But we had those, and it showed us the etymology of how they were built and all that.
Yeah, the Japanese whiskeys have always been so fascinating to me because of what you were. We actually learned this when we did the tasting with you when these people were setting up their distilleries. Where they set it up was designed to mimic where they were
mimic
gonna,
Scotland.
Yeah. So talk to me about that.
I mean, it wasn't those people. It was one guy. One guy started the entire industry. Wow. This guy, Mr. Teketsuru, who in the 1920s, Japanese whiskey is a lot older than most people think. It's just hit our market like in the last 30 years, but they've been doing it for a long time. But yeah, 1920s, this guy was studying in Edinburgh, fell in love with a Scottish woman, married her. Her family was in the whiskey business. Went back, learned about whiskey. Went back to Japan, walked up to the front doors of Suntory, which at the time was making like a rice spirit, and went to the owner and said, "Hey, check this, try this." And the guy's like, "Wow, this is amazing. How do we do this?" He's like, "Oh, give me a bunch of money in like a year, and I'm going to go find you a place to build a distillery in Japan." And spent the next year looking for a place that resembled the climate, water source, all that sort of stuff, and said, "Okay, build me a distillery here."
It's amazing.
And that was Suntory, and they built 3 distilleries. And then Mr. Teketsuru was like, "Okay, I'm out. I want to start my own thing." So he started Nika.
Wow.
So all the whiskey in Japan comes
The
from
balls
this
on this
one
guy.
guy.
Yeah.
He's known as the godfather of Japanese whiskey. He started everything.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And you clearly, like you mentioned it before too, about passion. You're clearly very passionate about this. Is there a group of you that are this passionate inside of your management team about whiskey that you guys are like nerding out about this?
I have, unfortunately, no, I have one other guy. Yeah, there's one other guy right now on the team. He's a manager. He's been with me. Actually, he left, and I was stuck without any help on my whiskey world. During the pandemic, he left to become a mailman, and got so bored that he's back. So I'm very
Nice.
happy.
So he's probably happy he's back now with everything going on.
Yeah, of course he wouldn't have a job right now, right? But yeah, no, he came back, and the two of us, we get way too deep into it and start talking about things that nobody understands, and but we actually we're doing some social media kind of like this, but we're doing some social media stuff where we started doing videos. We haven't released them yet. We started a little 3-minute, 2-minute reels called Whiskey Business that are sort of like mini tastings, like what you guys experience. Cool. That's just so people can sort of see how we do it and what we talk about. Yeah,
that's awesome. Closing the loop on the whiskey thing. It's if somebody, so little backstory on me. The only reason I started drinking whiskey, because when I was a teenager, I used to watch movies and I saw really cool people that I thought were really cool drinking whiskey. And I was like, okay, I guess that's what I need to start drinking. So I'm 18 years old. Maybe I was 17, but for the purposes of this podcast, I was 18. And I was just having like Red Label because it was the only thing that was like relatively inexpensive, and I was choking it down. It did not taste good, but I just choked it down enough where eventually I was like, yeah, whatever. And then when I had a good whiskey, I was like, oh, this is really good. So I kind of like forced myself to get into it. How does somebody, is it normal that somebody just tries whiskey for the first time and loves it? How does somebody enter it? And what's kind of the gateway whiskey that you recommend if you want to open somebody to the world of it?
One of my first experiences when I was a busboy at McKibben's, and whatever year that was, 25, 30 years ago, there was an Irish bartender, and I was working they had a downstairs bar on the one on Bishop, and it was slow night, and he's like, "What do you know about whiskey?" I'm like, "A little bit, I really want to learn more." And we went backwards, which is weird. We started at like some really nice stuff. And we came back, and it was the whole point was he was like, "This is by the end of it, you're gonna be like, I don't want to drink this anymore." And that sort of opened my eyes to like what a better whiskey was. It was interesting to do it that way instead of going up from like the lower end whiskey up to the higher end stuff. But yeah, no, if you're getting into whiskey, it can be intimidating. It's also like it's not something you just buy at the SAQ because one whiskey tastes so different from another whiskey. And it's like I always say, you go to the SQ on a Friday night, you buy a $25 bottle of wine, you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. You finish it, that's it. Right. But you buy a bottle of whiskey, it's $100, $150. You hate it, that's a problem, right? Yeah. So, the best way to do it would be come to the Burgundy Lion.
There we go.
We will
get educated on it.
That's awesome.
Tell you how to do it. Yeah.
My story, my whiskey journey is kind of comparable or similar to yours in a little way. It was actually Logan's dad, of all people, who I had like other whiskeys. I always hated them. They were just disgusting. I had to like cut them with something to choke it down, and I wanted to be cool with everybody else, so I'd do it anyways. But it was Logan's dad had a bunch of this, like it was older whiskey. I don't even remember what it was, but he's like, "Oh, this is all gonna expire. We got to drink it."
He got you.
He got me.
Yeah,
he got you.
All whiskey that was old enough to order its own whiskey. So we drank a bunch of it, and we drank a little bit too much of it, which was also fun. But just realizing like, oh my God, wait a minute, that taste over here is part of this. Like this is what it's trying to be. And then you appreciate the stuff that is maybe not as refined, but you're like, oh, it's trying. Oh, cool. and then you go down.
Yeah,
the path.
it's interesting to go backwards like that. But yeah, to your point, like the 6th, 7th whiskey is always good.
Absolute facts. Absolute facts. Good Lord. I recently had a whiskey that I had a weird feeling about. Maybe you can speak to it a little bit, but maybe when you were not now, you're so high up in all the tastings that you've done. But I won one of those lotteries that the SAQ did, and so I won this 18-year-old Singleton. And it was like a $300 bottle or something like that. And so I won the opportunity to spend $300 on a bottle of whiskey. Yeah. So I bought it, but I had it and I knew it was good, but I didn't understand it whatsoever. It was just, I felt like the best description I had was, this is way above my pay grade.
Okay. And it was sweet, right? A little bit?
It wasn't super sweet. It had some like floralness to it, but it had so many depths of characters that I was like, I don't know what this is.
I mean, what's really fun, like it's the rarity more that you're getting out of that, right?
Yeah.
It's a distillery that doesn't release a lot of stuff, and you're getting to try stuff that Singleton. Most of what Singleton does is they produce a fair amount, but it goes into blends.
Okay.
So to actually experience it as a single malt is pretty rare.
Right.
So yeah, it's more about the rarity to see what it is. I can't remember who the blend is that buys from it, but yeah, to what it is you liked about it, I can't tell you, because that's the whole thing. As we probably discussed at the tasting, everyone's palates are different.
Yeah.
There's no whiskey that everyone's going to like. It's about figuring out the style that you like and going that way.
It's one of the reasons I love it. I was when I was younger, my early 20s, I was tasting whiskey with a friend of the family's, Matt, and he was saying, well, I'm tasting this or whatever. I'm smelling this. I said, well, I'm smelling this and I'm tasting that. He's like, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, like, you do a wine tasting with a sommelier, and they're going to give you this whole like spiel of what you're going to taste.
I hate when they do it before you have it.
I hate when
Let me have it first so I can tell you, and you can tell me.
You see it on some of the bottles of whiskey, and they'll write the flavor profile.
I never read it. I never read it. I never read it.
When I first was doing tastings, I'd give notes like that sort of thing, and then I was like, oh man, this is placebo effect. This is making people feel these things.
100%.
There are some though that I'm like a child, right? And I'm like, I want to read about it because I'm so excited about it, and I'm waiting to drink it with a friend. So like I will go through it and I'll do that, but you're
I want to do it after though. I want to taste it and be like, oh, I'm pretty sure this is, caramel, maybe a little bit of toffee and like some black toast or something like that, and then I'll read it and be like, hey. But either way, like we said, it's like you're right. No matter what.
Everyone's palates are different, right? So if you get that, I might not get that. It's like it's forcing people to get a certain flavor, and I find that diminishes the experience of drinking the whiskey.
And older is always better. That's another thing we learned when we were.
Absolutely not. No, that's a common it's a common myth of that it was marketing in the 1980s, 1990s, well, actually 1990s, 2000s that. They just had a lot of old product due to the fact that whiskey had not been popular during the 80s and 70s. Speaking of cool guys drinking stuff, it was mostly because of James Bond.
Yeah.
He made vodka. Like vodka wasn't a thing until the 1960s, 70s. Wow. And James Bond made it a thing. And it's funny in the books, he drinks Macallan. He drinks whiskey. Yeah. But some director was like, no, he's going to drink vodka martini.
Wow.
Yeah. And ironically, it was a Scottish guy, right? It was. Sean Connery, who was the one who ruined the whiskey industry.
Oh, God.
But yeah, they just had a lot of it. So they went out there and tried to convince the world that older was better. And they did a great job. And everyone bought into it. And now they're in trouble because there's not enough liquid on the planet and everything's young again. And now they're having to go back and be like, actually, we'll tell you the truth about whiskey. That there's amazing young whiskeys and amazing old whiskeys.
Platinum blend.
Yeah.
Gold blend.
Exactly.
Yeah, all the different colors. All the colors of the rainbow.
Yeah.
Back to the restaurant business. How did you start your first one? So you said the Burgundy Lime was the first one that you started. How does somebody go from not owning a restaurant to owning a restaurant?
So I was, like I said, I was McKibben's. I was working in the industry while I was at school. I was in university. And
were you studying business? Or
I was not.
Like
I was studying sociology.
Wow.
I was nowhere near.
Okay.
Well, I guess maybe there's some aspects to it. Yeah. And at a certain point, I don't know when it happened, but I decided that I preferred my job to my education, and I wanted to continue in that industry. Mm-hmm. So I just set about learning everything. So I did every job out there. I've worked in kitchens. I've worked as a busboy, as a server, as a bartender, as a manager, and then I was running. One of the sort of high-end clubs in the W Hotel in 2003-ish. Mm-hmm. Was that 2003? Yeah, 2003. And that's when I started putting my business plan. Okay, that was the best experience working for those guys, because I was working for Americans from New York. There's nothing better than working for New York hospitality people. They are the best at what they do. They have to be, because of how difficult New York is. And I learned so much stuff from those guys. But I was like, okay, how do I take this model and apply it towards a pub? And so I sort of took some of their concepts and started putting a business plan together. Found 3 guys who were into it, and one of which was working for me at the W at the time. A couple other guys I knew. Pulled our money together, scraped every single cent we had together, built the Burning Lion pretty much. We had a contractor who would do the work during the day, and then at night we'd come in and
Because it was just a shell. They didn't have any of the
there
booths or bars.
There was a
anything?
restaurant there before, but we needed a lot of work to turn into a pub. And we'd come in at like 4.
Wow.
Don't tell the CCQ, but we'd come in at 4, and the contractor I'd be like, okay, teach us something for the next 6 hours, and then we just build stuff for 6 hours.
Wow.
There's a lot of loose old things.
It's charming.
Yeah,
there's a lot of charm in
You
there.
got a lot of civil liability insurance. No.
Yeah, but it was. We opened that on a shoestring.
Yeah.
You couldn't really do that anymore. And
What was the shoestring? What was the entire pooled
it
amount?
was about 300.
Wow.
Which is
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, 300, and we had to buy the phone to come out from them. So we spent, I think it was 100. So it was about 200 only was the investment on.
Wow.
on
Yeah, that is a shoestring.
Yeah.
What would it cost now to do the same thing?
Man, anything you're looking at least $1 million to do anything. If you're, the thing is, we've only been successful, and the best way to do it is to unfortunately find a place that's closed. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
Building from scratch is $2, $3, $4 million.
And that doesn't scare you when you're looking at places that have closed? Because you've opened up a couple now. Like you look at a place that's closed and you're like, they failed already?
Every one of my successful restaurants are in buildings that were previous restaurants that failed.
Wow.
So it's not nothing to do with the operators. It's right concept, right place, right? You got to figure out what you're doing. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. It is a little, especially Burning Lion. There was 4 different restaurants had gone through there in the previous year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, it just kept closing, opening, closing.
You've been 16 years there, you said?
Yeah, but I was dating a girl at Joe Beef across the street at the time, so I'd go down there and I kept looking at, because this is when I was trying to find a location, and I was like, go outside and I'd look across the street and like, that's the pub, that's what it is. It looks like a pub. That's got to be it. And it kept flipping. I'm like, fuck, I missed my chance. And then eventually I reached out to the landlord directly and said, hey, next time it goes down, call me and we'll do this. Yeah.
Next time it goes down.
Yeah.
What were some of the previous failed attempts? What were they?
They
trying
were
to do?
like French-ish.
Okay.
They were kind of lacking concepts maybe, but they're Italian French, sort of without a real identity, I think.
Right.
It's a big space too. So I don't know if it's amenable to a smaller French or Italian restaurant.
So you were talking about identity a little bit. Is that the main reason you think most restaurants fail, or what's the main piece of continuity that exists across all failed restaurant attempts?
I think the biggest thing is not understanding that it's a business first before it's anything else, right? So many people who get into restaurant industry are chefs or bartenders or great front of house people. Who might not have the experience on the business end of it, and if you're not on top of those numbers, if you're not all over it, you can be there's full restaurants that close, restaurants that are full every night, and they close just because they're not. You have to maintain, you have to see what you're doing. I find it's the biggest problem in the industry, and because of it, it's really hard to get financing for a restaurant because the failure rate is so high. It's almost impossible to get any money from anyone. Like once you have a little bit of a track record, it's easier. But yeah, no, it's not running it as a business first and foremost is what I think the biggest problem with restaurants.
Fair enough. It was something I'm always really curious about because I've been to so many different restaurants. My wife likes to tell me that she's a foodie, and I'm like, well, I think you just like to go out and eat, and so do I. But I've been to great restaurants, I've been to crappy restaurants, and it's I think it's the experience more than anything, and I think it ties into what you were talking about before, which is like if they know what they are, and they're playing to their strengths.
Yeah.
It's always a great experience, I find. When you're trying to be all things for all people, I think it's very difficult. Like places like, I don't know, like Jack Astor's or something like that, they do well trying to do the all things to all people to a certain degree. They're not going to satisfy somebody who's expecting fine dining, but somebody who wants a melange of a whole bunch of different cuisines can go to a place like that. But for the most part, especially with the discerning clientele of downtown Montreal, you probably have to pick your lane and stick to it.
Specialty.
Yeah, I mean, like I've always said, I'm not in the food and drink business. That's not what I do. I sell experiences.
In real estate, we often say the same thing about the business, because it's not a house selling business. If people come into this thinking this is a house selling business, I love houses. It's really a people moving business. And when you discern the difference between the two, you realize that you really need to understand people a lot better in this business. And like you said, it's a lot of businesses. People think that there's just this one thing that they need to be good at, and they'll be able to run the whole business on it. You need to be good at
Everything.
You need to be good at the whole business side of it. And for you, it's experiences. I love the idea of we're selling experiences. We're not selling food and drink.
We also have to be good at. I'm an electrician. I'm a plumber now. I'm all these things. Right?
Yeah.
Like all these things that
You got to be a jack of all trades.
You got to learn quick.
You become a landlord.
Yeah.
So how does somebody, because I think you kind of nailed it, is a lot of front of house people think they can just open their own restaurant. How does somebody get the experience of knowing the numbers and getting good in the business aspect of things to be able to feel comfortable and confident moving forward in that way?
I mean, I think you have to, like, I'm really good, I think, of like bringing my managers, especially my general managers and my head chefs into like all the conversations of the numbers.
Okay.
You know, I'll show them financials and I'll get them in that. And I think it's just about, you know, learning these numbers and having the experience. Again, if I hadn't lucked into that job at the W, it probably wouldn't have succeeded. But that's what those guys taught me. And so I feel like it's kind of a duty for me to pass that on as well, whether it's somebody who stays with me and works with me in another restaurant or goes and does their own thing. Nothing. I have a few guys who've left and gone and done their own things, and they've generally been successful, and that honestly like makes me super happy. Like, it's not like I'm not upset that they left to do their own thing. I'm like, if you succeed, I'm super happy. I hope that, you know, I'm part of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you had any experiences where you've put something together and put it out there, and it either didn't pass like the test of the group that was going to start it, or didn't, like, you actually started it and it didn't pass, like it failed?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not really fail. I had there was 3 Britain ships at one point. There's only 1 left.
Oh, wow.
That was, I mean, I don't want to blame anything specifically, but they both shut in the pandemic. So it was just like, one of them was beside Concordia, and that was just the end of the world when there's no students or anything like that. And they were work from home or school from home for like a year.
Yeah.
And the rent ain't cheap. And
none of it. And then I recently it wasn't really the same thing. I had a management contract at a new hotel in Montreal, and we were doing the restaurant bar, everything there. It's not that it failed, but I had like there was after a year there was sort of an out that I took. Right, I decided it was more it wasn't financial, it was the time. And how it was costing my other businesses because the amount of time that was going into it. And so they would pull the plug on that. But I mean, if you don't, failures are good. Failures are good. You got to learn from what'd you do?
100%.
What'd you do wrong?
We talk about that all the time on this podcast, is how important it is to learn from those situations. I'm curious because you mentioned that you've got kids, you've got a life at home, and obviously restaurant business is tough in terms of its hours. How did you manage that growing this empire that you've built?
Well, yeah. Like I'll say to anyone who asks me, like, should I start a restaurant? Honestly, like for me, I think it's really difficult to do if you're not single, right? Or like when we all started, we were all single. Babies all came later. I mean, we were pretty young. We were in late 20s, early 30s. There's for the time investment, if you have young kids, I don't know if it's doable. The time investment, and also you're becoming an entrepreneur. You're gambling your child's future. And you're hoping it's going to work. So yeah, I was lucky enough to do it before I had kids and before I had a family. But I don't think I would not suggest it to anyone who's has a young family starting.
Fair enough. Yeah. And so what does your time commitment at these restaurants look like now that you've built it up and you've hired managers and you have GMs that are running things and all that kind of stuff? What does that time commitment look like now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said about the owner's eyes thing, you still have to be around. You can't just leave it. My job is a lot more 9 to 5 or more 9 to 7-ish now. But as you know, I do whiskey tastings, things like that. As you know, I love doing that stuff, but it's also like, hey, I'm going to be at the pub on a Saturday night till 11:30, 12 o'clock. right? I will drop in on the pubs at night. Like you still have to do, we have events, you know,
Yes.
so you're out at night and do that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, I try to keep it more towards the 9 to 6, 9 till 7.
Makes
then,
sense.
but you still have to, yeah, you're not going to ever get under 40 hours as a restaurant owner.
Yeah. And you say events, is that just like the whiskey tastings that you're going out to do, or there's other types of events that you have to attend to, like, hey, Burgundy Lion's here? Or,
Yeah,
hey,
well,
Chips
the
here?
event's offsite or onsite, right? So our marketing strategy from day one has been events, right?
Okay.
That's another thing I learned from the Americans, from the New Yorkers, where yeah, sure, you can do radio, social media, you can do whatever you want for marketing, but doing like at a charity event or a different event, you need eyes and eyes on your restaurant. You need people walking through that door, and people who, when an event is thrown, there's going to be 30 new people who've never been there, right? And you give them a good experience. So we put together our own events, or somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to do this here. Like, okay, we'll do it, right? And then you kind of have to be around, and you have to shake hands and kiss babies and say, hey, yeah, guys, like, this is the Burgundy Lion, this is what we do. And yeah, it's really.
That's awesome. Well, listen, Toby, thank you so much for being here and chatting with us. As always, we like to keep this podcast around 30 minutes, and then we always end these things saying, we got to have you back. We got to do a part 2.
Yep.
But thank you again so much for being here. We're excited. We're off camera. We're about to do some whiskey tasting. So sucks to suck. Maybe you guys can get a part of this. But if they do want to get in touch with Burgundy Lion and book a whiskey tasting or come on down, what's the best way to book the whiskey tasting? Because obviously that's a huge thing. We talked about whiskey a lot today. What's the easiest way that they can get in touch?
BurgundyLion.com. They'll find the
Heck
link
yeah.
Reserve a
directly.
whiskey tasting thing, yeah.
I love it. So get into whiskey, get into restaurant tourism if you've got the cojones for it. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Montreal's Elite Unleashed, the podcast for hustlers looking to level up their lives. Thanks again, Toby. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Heck yeah.